Today, we're going to talk about gargoyle geckos, bioactive enclosures, and everything that means. I'm Sean. This is Charizard, and this is Legacy Retics. So you want to get into gargoyle geckos, crested geckos, or any other new Caledonian gecko. Today I'm going to show you how to make a bioactive enclosure for a gargoyle gecko, crested gecko, or other new Caledonian species. The first thing we need to figure out before getting our gecko is what enclosure we're going to keep them in. And that really depends on their size, age, and what your intentions are for them. Do you want them as a display animal? Are they strictly a breeder? Are you trying to go budget? Are you trying to spend thousands? Once you have that figured out, you can move on to the next step. What we're going to be using is a 29-gallon aquarium turned vertically on its side, and we're using a conversion kit from iHeartGecko.com. You can pick these up relatively cheap for under 50 bucks. This is the 1/4 inch thick model. I highly suggest that. The 1/8 inch is just a little too thin. Now, as you can see, we've done a background very nicely to this. We did this about 4 years ago and never did anything with it. What this is pond and stone expanding foam. I'll insert a picture here so you know what to get. You take that pond and stone foam, you spray it, carve it into whatever you want, cover it in 100% silicone. Doesn't matter what brand, is color, anything, as long as it is 100% silicone, no mold inhibitors, anything like that. You want 100% silicone. You don't have to spend a ton of money getting aquarium safe silicone. 100% silicone is 100% silicone. You're going to put silicone all over your background and press in cocoa fiber, peat moss, whatever you want to use to give it a nice texture. And then for the sides, we covered the sides in a thin layer of silicone, and again pressed our medium into the silicone. Now the next step, after you've gotten your enclosure figured out, you've got your background figured out, you want to figure out what substrate you're going to use. Since we're going bioactive, I choose to use an ABG mix. Now what's so great about this ABG mix is this is what the cleanup crew needs to thrive. There's horticultural charcoal in here, and that's what our springtail are going to reside on and lay their eggs on. There's also fern fiber, peat moss, cocoa blocks, sphagnum moss, and broke down magnolia leaves. These are all important for our plant health and our cleanup crew health. The isopods will break down matter, and the springtail will break down matter. And so basically, your substrate cleans itself. If you're going to be getting into this and doing multiple enclosures, I recommend starting your own colony. It's pretty easy. I would recommend buying 50 isopods and a springtail colony. This springtail colony is from Josh's Frogs. I believe it's a 32-ounce kit. And I bought 50 powder blue isopods a long time ago, and this is that colony. I also have some zebras and some dairy cows as well. There's tons of really cool isopods out there if you want something unique, and they all actually have a little bit of a different personality. Some are more shy than others. Sometimes you don't see them as much, so it's kind of cool. And if you don't want to pay for isopods, just go out and flip some rocks and find some locally. So we figured out what our substrate is. We figured out what cleanup crew we're going to use. Now we're going to move on to decor. Now, all of these plants that you see in front of me, I purchased for under $40 at Lowe's. You're also going to want cork bark, cork rounds. If you want to use some fake plants, you can. Magnolia leaves. If you're doing a big enclosure, you can even get show grade cork rounds. This is a big cork round that I've actually cut in half. It was twice this length. You can also use a hole saw drill to go ahead and make some holes just to make it look a little more realistic. The first thing we're going to want to do after we've gotten our substrate in there is give it a really good soak. And you might even want to soak it before you put it in. Next, I recommend figuring out your placement. Set them in there. See what looks the best. Rearrange them. Sometimes you have massive root balls on the bottom. Just go ahead and rip those off. You're not going to hurt the plant. Grab the plant gently by the base and expose the root ball. It's just like gardening at home. Now that we've got our plants in place, we're going to go ahead and add some decor. For this, we're going to use some cork bark and magnolia leaves. Now that we've got our plants and decor in place, we're going to go ahead and grab some leaf litter and just randomly put some leaves in here. This not only looks great, but it's going to give some coverage to our isopods. Isopods love to hide under leaves and other things in the forest. Now that we've got everything in there, we're going to give it a nice misting. Make sure everything's good and wet. You always want to make sure you water your plants after you plant them. And then we're going to add the bugs. And this enclosure will be ready for a gargoyle gecko. And if I have one tip for a plant, like this plant right here or a bromeliad, they hold water. And this is a great natural way for your gecko to have water. This will hold water throughout the day, so even after it dries up, there's still going to be water inside of some of these plants that your gecko can drink safely. Alright guys, let's get some bugs. So these are our springtails, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the water, we're going to dump some in there, and the springtails float. So now there's some springtails in there. They're so cute. These geckos are so cool. What do you think, Charizard? Wow. Oh. What are you doing, you crazy guy? Alright, calm down. We're gonna put him up.